Thank everybody. Okay, so we got to get.
Can we turn up the sound a little bit?
A little bit. And I want to thank everybody for joining us this evening. As you know, when we sent out the invitation, this is a conversation about the changes that have been made to the criminal justice propositions for the League of Women Voters of not only Midland, but the state and the United States. And I want to give Sandra some credit before I give her her bio, because this goes back to a year ago when she realized that maybe the criminal justice position that we had locally and at the state level and at the national level was dated. And she made a comment and we told her to go for it here legal, in our local league, come up with suggestions. And without getting into all the detail, I can tell you, she found out that out in California, there was a position that seemed to be really prime and up to date. And she recommended that we adopt it. And she was successful in getting it passed by the League of Women Voters of Michigan at our convention this last year. And it all the way went up to the National League and they adopted it. So I want to give her credit that she will not take for herself tonight before we start. And with that, I want to give you a little bit about Sandra and her commitment to criminal justice. Sandra Haughton was born and raised in Omaha, Nebraska, the daughter of Attorney Ray and Mrs. Susan Williams. Following completion of the Omaha public school system, she pursued her interest in human behavior by completing an undergraduate degree in psychology at the University of Denver. In 1964, Sandra and her husband Ronald moved to Midland, Michigan, and we accepted a position with the Dow Chemical Company. After raising their two daughters through elementary school, Sandra returned to academia and completed a master's degree in clinical psychology at Central Michigan University. For the next year, Sandra worked at several community mental health agencies in the Saginaw Bay area and the Michigan Department of Mental Health, while continuing her study of neuropsychology at the University of Michigan. The death of her father in 1990 prompted a return to Omaha to care for her elderly widowed mother. She worked as a certified school psychologist in the Omaha Public School District and also as a certified family mediator in the Office of Dispute Resolution in the state of Nebraska. Following her retirement from the Omaha Public Schools, Sandra and Ron returned to Midland. She enjoyed her knowledge and experience in the field of psychology through an adjunct position at Delta College as an invited speaker for local youth groups. I want to also tell you that as a member of the Tri-City Links, Inc. and as Alpha Sorority, Inc., her programs received both local and state recognition. In 2018, Sandra received a Lifetime Achievement Award from YMCA. Ron and Sandra are parents of 2 adult children, grandparents to 3 cats, and 2 dogs. Sandra is active in the Midland Area League of Women Voters, where she is Director of Advocacy, focusing on the criminal justice system. In 2021, her precise and meticulous review of the League of Women Voters correction position led to the adoption of a comprehensive California criminal justice position by the League of Women Voters of Michigan and the League of Women Voters of the US. This significant step affirmed the need to more tangibly engage in the reshaping of our local, state, and national approach to criminal justice. And with that, Sandra, I'm going to turn this over to you because we're all interested in what you had to say about criminal justice. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. Criminal justice through the eyes, through the lens of the League of Women Voters. You know, Criminal justice is an enormous and very complicated subject. There's been many books written about it, thousands of journal articles, significant amount of research, numerous conferences convened, many interviews with individuals who've been impacted by the system. I therefore feel somewhat challenged to be addressing you tonight about criminal justice in the time that I've been allotted. So I considered what are the most important things I could tell you. First, I want to talk to you about how much human life is tangled up in this system. Globally, in the United States, and in Michigan. I want you to be aware of some of the factors that drive this system and the factors that maintain the system. I'm going to share with you some challenges that are within the system, and I'll also talk about goals in mass incarceration, and are we getting a good return for all the money we spend? Now, the League of Women Voters understands the criminal justice system as it is. They have invested time and energy to educate themselves as well as others. The League has identified and articulated their position on every aspect of the criminal justice sequence. This comprehensive document, which Kim referred to, is the foundational basis on which local leagues can develop an advocacy program. Now, a necessary prerequisite for local leagues is to look at this national position and conduct a careful study of their community to ensure its relevance. The presentation tonight will not include police policy or practices. Neither will it include children and youth services. This discussion will focus on adult correction and the result, mass incarceration. Now, in 2019, and the slide is before you, the Crime and Justice Prison Policy Research Group published an article which identified what countries in the world have the largest population of incarcerated people. You will see that the US has 2.3 million people who are incarcerated. It's followed by China with 1.6 million. 11 million people around the world are in prisons and jails. The US locks up a larger share of these people than any other country, with as many incarcerated as the 194 countries with the smallest incarcerated population. Next slide, please. At the end of 2022, Statistica, another research group, looked again at countries. China had the largest population of people incarcerated, 1,690,000, followed by the United States, 1,675,400. The point in all of this, in these two different research groups, They looked at the incarceration rate, but found very, very similar results. China and the US had the largest mass incarceration in the world. That is significant. It should be noted that the US has less than 5% of the world's population, but 25% of the world's prisoners. Going to the United States, the criminal justice system is characterized by mass incarceration, which costs the government and families of justice-involved people $1.9 million. They cost at least $183 billion every year, and 1.9 million people are locked up. Okay. This slide identifies some of the areas, this side and the following slide, because this slide doesn't give the true picture. The next slide includes people who are on parole, not quite, people are on parole.
To get that done for 2020.
And probation, but they are still under the auspices of the criminal justice system. Okay, if we looked at the state of Michigan, compared to the rest of the United States, out of the top 10 states with the highest prison rate, Michigan ranks number 9. Michigan has the largest sentences in the country, and they continue to be longer. About 1/4 of the people incarcerated in Michigan are serving sentences that are 20 years or longer, including life sentences. There are 64,000 people from Michigan behind bars. Now, some of these slides don't include all of the people, because those numbers include state prisons, local jails, federal prisons, involuntary commitment, parole, probation. All of those numbers add up to 253,000. Michigan residents are behind bars or under the criminal justice supervision. Michigan, I should tell you, has 34 state prisons and 82 county jails. These numbers are confounding. How did we get there? What happened? What happened? How did this happen? Do we have that slide? Yes. This slide shows all of the contributing factors. They're not necessarily in order, or the percent of contribution. Each identified, but we're going to briefly look at some of these contributions. All of these entities that are on this screen contributed to the enormous number of people incarcerated. Okay, local jails. They usually don't receive very much attention when people talk about criminal justice. But in fact, they play a very critical role, because they are, for the most part, incarceration's front door. they have a greater impact than we realize. Now, there's a point of difference. I have to tell you this. Prisons are facilities under state or local control where people go who are found guilty of a crime. They go there to serve their sentences. Whereas jails are city or county-run facilities where the majority of the people are locked up waiting for trial. However, in other words, they are waiting for trial. They are still legally innocent, but they are in jail. Next slide, pre-trial detention. Well, most people in jail are not convicted, but they are locked up awaiting trial. Many are detained because they cannot afford to pay the bail to secure their release. The median bail for felonies is $10,000, which represents 8 months' income for a typical person detained because they can't pay bail. Jails are not the only place detaining people pre-trial. The federal government and other authorities detain another 88,000 people. These people remain in jail because they cannot afford bail. There are some people who can afford bail, and within hours or days, regardless of the charges, they can get out of jail. But others are too poor to make bail, and they remain in jail until their trial. Local jails then can be described as wealth-based incarceration. Those who cannot make bail are often dealing with poverty, mental illness, substance abuse disorders. Those problems only become worse with incarceration, but without access to cash, some people may become desperate and they take out loans from bail bond companies that charge exorbitant fees. These companies require upfront fees that are non-refundable. In other words, the wealth-based incarceration disproportionately punishes and targets Black and other people of color and other disadvantaged people and communities. A recent report written jointly by the Color of Change and ACLU showed that fewer than 10 companies in the United States are responsible for a significant majority of the 14 million in bonds for profit made by bail bondsmen each year. So they make a nice, tidy little sum on being bail bondsmen. The pretrial policies drive jail growth. 1 of 3 people behind bars in jail, most of whom have yet to be tried in court. In this slide, you will see that those who are held in jail are not convicted, and the smaller amount actually are convicted. There is a strong correlation between pretrial detention and whether one is eventually convicted. In that, as I mentioned, people become so desperate, they take or they agree to a plea bargain or a plea deal. So, in a typical year, 600,000 people enter prison gates, but people go to jail over 10 million times a year. So the growth in the total jail population over the last 25 years is the direct result of increases in pretrial detention, not in increases in convicted people. The point of all of this is jail or prison. These people are incarcerated. The problem is in pretrial detention, they're incarcerated, but they're legally innocent. There is a real problem. 658,000. 1 in 3 people behind bars is in jail. Most have yet to be tried in court. Therein is a real problem. Now, another driver in the large number of incarcerated people is the sentencing structure. The mandatory minimum sentence is a policy that does not allow the sentencing judge to take into consideration any extenuating circumstances, such as no past history of criminal behavior, whether or not there was extenuating circumstances during the commission of a crime, whether or not the individual has psychosocial history that was very unhealthy, or a mental ability of the person charged, or severe economic conditions. Those are really extenuating circumstances that should be perhaps considered in sentencing. However, with this mandatory minimum sentence, there is a specific sentence for a specific offense. The next rule or policy that contributes to an increase in incarceration is the Truth in Sentencing bill. That requires that a person serve out all the imposed sentence in spite of good behavior, in spite of responsiveness to rules and regulations, in spite of further demonstration of a willingness to learn a different life, demonstration that they want to seek a different career path. All of those things are not under consideration in the Truth and Sentencing law or rule, because with that truth and sentencing, the person is obliged. They must serve out all the important sentence in spite of good behavior. Now, we've looked at some of the factors that drive large numbers of people into the criminal justice system. For the next few minutes, we'll look at some of the factors that maintain this system. The first one is gerrymandering. This is a practice where prisoners are counted in the location in which they are incarcerated, instead of their home communities. Now, this practice artificially inflates the prison area population by giving them greater political clout. This practice received more publicity as the United States attempted to deal with gerrymandering in the states. Recent publicity on gerrymandering in the states gained more publicity. It became more widely aware. And so gerrymandering of the prisons has been exposed as a contributing factor. Counties, cities, and school boards confirmed to have avoided prison gerrymandering. State law prohibits or discourages. However, we all know how people fight gerrymandering, don't we? Anyway, states have introduced legislation abolishing prison gerrymander. And how long has that gone on? Gaining political clout. Okay, the next one that helps to maintain the large number of incarcerated people is privatization of prisons. Privatization incentivizes by providing financial rewards for keeping prisons' populations high. If you recall, the last slide, which identified where money is allocated, all of these entities are stakeholders. Looking back at following the money, if we can do that, if we can look back at that one, we will notice public corrections and agencies, 80.7 million. Judicial and local. Policing, 62 billion. Corrections agency, 80.7 billion. Public employees, judicial and local criminal law. Healthcare. I should say something more about healthcare because with the longer sentences, people are getting older, and some of us might be aware that as you get older, you have health problems. Likewise, with people who are incarcerated, as they get older and older, their health becomes problematic, requiring more health services. Hence, this figure will increase. Okay. Now, you will also see that almost half the money in this following the money is spent on running the correctional system. The system goes to paying staff. Staff. This group is an influential lobby that sometimes prevents, if they can, reform in reducing the incarcerated population because they make a great deal of money on the population being very high. That lobby sometimes prevents reform, and their influence is often protected even when prison populations decrease. Interesting. Okay, private companies. Now, private companies are sometimes hired by state facilities, kind of like third party, the outsourcing, if you will, of services. Private companies that supply goods to prison commissaries, for example, or provide telephone service to correctional facilities, bring in almost $2.9 billion. Because incarcerated people and their families are literally a captive market that private companies, now these are outsourced, companies with the collusion of facilities, they are too eager to exploit the people that are there. Let me give you a few examples of this. Incarcerated people and their families often have to pay $1 a minute or more for a phone call. Why? Because prisons and jails profit by granting monopoly phone contracts to the companies that will charge the most. Second example, when prisons fail to provide adequate food and other basics, the commissary, which is run by a private company, is the only option at inflated prices. These are examples. This is what happens in private prisons that outsource services. Email, which is free for people outside of prison like the rest of us, cost an incarcerated person and their families anywhere from 5 cents to $1.25 per message. When families send their loved ones money in prison, there is a fee for cashing the check or the money order. These practices are well documented and are an illustration that the profit motive is alive and well. It should be noted, if you watch President Biden's State of the Union address, he referred to junk fees. These are fees which are attached to regular transactions that many people might ignore. However, it was quickly pointed out to the president that incarcerated people are regularly subjected and victimized by companies charging exorbitant fees. And they are people who have no other option. So, private prisons have a vested interest in maintaining the large number of people who are incarcerated. We're talking about how it is and what is it? What are the factors that maintain, that drove the system and that maintain it in its current form? One more example. The war on drugs had a major propelling influence on the rates of incarceration in the United States. It has been well documented that the war on drugs began by Richard Nixon in the early 1970s. This was a racially motivated scheme devised by Nixon to discredit the civil rights movement and to criminalize young Black and brown people and those who express anti-war positions. Essentially, there was a sentencing disparity between offenders convicted of crimes involving crack cocaine and powder cocaine, with one getting a much more severe prison sentence. Now, in reality, there is no pharmaceutical difference between those two drugs. But the punitive approach has come to define America's criminal justice system, America's criminal legal system, and accelerated the number of Black individuals receiving harsher and longer sentences. Now, it should be noted that in December, the 2022 issue of Politics reports that U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland has instructed prosecutors to end disparity between crack and powder cocaine. So, December 16th, 2022, Attorney General instructs the prosecutors. Now, this is going to end decades long policy that drove thousands and thousands of people into the criminal justice, more harsh than other folks. Now, I'm going to switch gears a minute, and I'm going to talk about the League of Women Voters and the role they've played in the area of criminal justice. As early as the convention, the League of Women Voters US Convention of 2012, the League of Women Voters believed that alternative to imprisonment should be explored and utilized, taking into consideration the circumstances and the nature of the crime. Well, doesn't that sound familiar? By the years 2018 to 2020, the League in only 32 states in the country had developed a criminal justice position. By the year 2021, the League of Women Voters in all 50 states voted to have one standard and uniform position on criminal justice. That comprehensive League of Women Voters US criminal justice position now forms the basis on which local leagues can develop programs of advocacy, and action. As I mentioned before, the League seeks to educate itself and then educate others on pertinent social issues. So when an initiative reaches a legislative committee, a voting body, or other decision makers, the League may take action through giving testimony, writing letters, making phone calls, and public statements. Education and advocacy is the League of Women Voters approach. Here are some examples of the League advocacy initiatives. In March 2021, the League of Women Voters Michigan supported a House Bill 4276, which would require the Department of Corrections to report pre-incarceration addresses of incarcerated individuals for voting district population counts. In October 2021, the League of Women Voters Michigan supported Senate Bill 649, which will allow for good time credits for prisoners. Michigan was one of 6 states that did not provide that credit. Later that month, the League sent a request to the Senate Judiciary Committee urging that a hearing be held on that bill. In November 2021, the League of Women Voters Michigan supported a set of pre-trial bills, Senate Bill 533 to 536, that established pre-trial procedures to ensure that no one suffers discrimination due to their inability to pay. Are some of those beginning to sound familiar? In February 2022, the League of Women Voters supported the legislative position that would repeal the truth in sentencing law and eliminate mandatory minimum sentences for extended time for misconduct and established a new type of earned credit that reduced sentences for earning a college degree or certification, working in a training program, or other eligible credits. In 2022, the League of Women Voters Michigan supported Senate Bill 848 to 852, which would abolish life without parole for juvenile offenders under the age of 17. Now, you've become more aware of challenges in the criminal justice system, and you have become more aware of the League of Women Voters' response to those challenges. In the final analysis, one might pose the question, what does the current criminal justice system hope to accomplish with such massive incarceration that involves so many citizens? What's the overall goal? Is there an overall goal? And what's the criteria for saying that that goal has been accomplished? Well, with little variation, the response to that question would probably be to keep the community safe. Okay. To that, my response would be, that's a very simple answer to a highly complicated question. I would see the answer as a three-part response to what are the goals. Number one, the person who has committed the harm must acknowledge the harm and take responsibility for it. Number two, the person who has committed the harm must be separated from society for a time to keep the community safe. The third is to rehabilitate the person and to give him or her more options in life from which to choose, so that they do not return to criminal behavior. Now, goals 1 and 2 appear to be fairly well addressed. But what can we say of goal number 3? Rehabilitation. A rehabilitation program would provide some type of skill building, academic support, job training, and mental health support during incarceration. Now, it's well documented that re-entry into a normal community life is extremely difficult, an extremely difficult adjustment. Essentially, we lock up troubled and damaged people, subject them to the prison environment for years, then release them. Perhaps they're even further damaged and more apt to fall back into criminal lifestyle. Then we blame them for lapsing back into crime. The return to prison after a failed parole is called recidivism. Think about this. If there is more effort or preparation for an individual to live a life crime-free, ability to sustain him or herself by holding a job, by obtaining housing, and living as a contributing member of a community, recidivism decreases. Whereas, if there is little effort or preparation to prepare an individual to sustain him or herself, to gain and hold a job, get housing, and contribute to a community, recidivism will. Right. Therein lies the criteria. If you invest in preparing someone, job skills, education, training, recidivism will decrease because they will be successful in the community. However, if you do the opposite, they cannot get a job, cannot hold a job, a job is dependent on stable housing. There are a lot of other things that make adjustment into normal community life very difficult. But if you make that investment, recidivism decreases. So there we have the criteria for a goal for criminal justice system. A revised paradigm would look like this. It's on the bottom of the screen. It's a revised paradigm. It's a paradigm shift from the retribution, punishment, the long sentences, the inability to redeem and restore themselves. The renewed or proposed paradigm shift would be responsibility, which leads to redemption, which leads to retraining, which leads to reentry, which leads to reinforcement or support. For example, the parole officer would shift from a monitor enforcer to a coach, advocate, advisor, supporter. Cheerleader, if you will. Now, I'm going to end this presentation with some encouraging information, some positives. There was a recent article in the Michigan Bridge magazine entitled "Michigan Government Dramatically Lowers Rates of Inmates Returning to Prison." Well, how did that happen? Well, approximately 7 years ago, the Hanalin Correctional Facility outside Ionia, Michigan, opened its first high-quality training facility called Vocational Village. Vocational Village was promoted as an immersive state-of-the-art collection of courses that people could take within 2 years of their reentry. Those courses included automotive technology, welding, computer coding, commercial truck driving, carpentry, plumbing, masonry work. They called this program the Michigan Offender Success Model that aimed to provide prisoners with education, skills, and job training in fields that could lead to stable careers and lower the risk of recidivism. I want you to be aware next of MySIMI. That stands for the Michigan Collaborative to End Mass Incarceration. It was created in 2015, and this broad-based, statewide, nonpartisan collective representing nonprofit, faith-based advocacy, grassroots, service organizations, these are united to end mass incarceration. The League of Women Voters Michigan is an organizational member. The mission is to serve incarcerated and formerly incarcerated individuals. I have to tell you, I went to a MySIMI meeting, and it was very interesting because, there were tables, you were assigned a table. You did not know who you were sitting next to. If it were somebody who had been incarcerated in the justice system or someone from one of those agencies. Very interesting conversations ensued. There, MySIMI is a group that it would be very interesting to know more about them and read more about them. I should tell you that you don't have to take notes, or I hope you didn't try, because I have prepared for you an outline of this talk. And I've also prepared for you a recommended reading list that would be about, maybe a fifth of the books I read or articles. I want to end with a quote from the League of Women Voters U.S. position. The first sentence says, "A criminal justice system that is just, they believe in and support a criminal justice system that is just, effective, equitable, transparent, and that fosters public trust at all stages." Thank you for your attention. I have concluded.
Thank you, Sandy, so much. I know I've learned a lot in this process. I learned more tonight, even though I've seen the slides for a while. If folks have questions, you're welcome to put those in the chat. You're also welcome. Please feel free to unmute, ask questions. We're happy to continue to let Sandy be our guide here.
Great job, Sandy. It was excellent information.
Thank you. I can't hear you, Kim.
Mute. For those of us that would love to get that list, I know you have a view of the criminal justice system in a handwritten form that I have through the lens. How would we be able, we'll put that out for other people to get the resources that you used for your presentation.
Some of them?
Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
All right.
I had an outline that there is an enormous amount of information. And so I had to construct a path, a reasonable path that people could follow. And so in constructing that path, I thought that would be very good for my audience to have. because it will refresh their memory on some of the points that I made. So that outline will be available. In addition to recommended reading, some of the reading was extraordinary, and I wanted to share that. So I will have a reading list as well. No, it won't include all zillion articles I read.
Well,
But
I
it'll include a
think
large number.
for all that, because you've gone to the part where you have a global perspective, a US perspective, a Michigan perspective, and what's driving the justice system, our current, how it's maintained, and you have an incredible biography of recommended readings. So we will make sure that this is out on our website for people to have access to. And I want to open it up now. Are there any questions that you have for Sandra?
Yes, Tracy.
I have a couple of questions. One was when you were showing the countries at the beginning, and it had
Yes.
100+ countries that have very small numbers of incarceration.
Mhm.
Of
Yes.
those countries,
I'm
how
sorry.
many of those countries, do you know how many of them have the death penalty, and what is the speed with which it's enforced?
I don't know. I don't know about those countries. I know that all of them put together did not even touch the number of China and US.
Well, and I think that the number from China is a bit misleading for two reasons. One is we really don't know how many they have, but also as a percentage of their population, it is a great deal smaller than the US's percentage of our population. So I think sometimes it might help if we saw a breakdown by percentage of population versus straight numbers of incarcerated.
You're right. In some of the articles, they talked about percentages of the population, and I just had to make a judgment.
Yeah, I understand. Thank you.
I
It was
could
very
do
good.
that, the percentage of the population. That would probably take a little bit longer. Even though it's very critical information, I totally agree. Yeah.
Thank you.
Are there other questions?
I,
Hi. I have my hand up. This is
yes.
Lisa. Thank you, Sandy. That was a lot of great information, and I concur with everything that you've said. It's about 2 years ago since I worked in a juvenile detention system, and it just kind of vouches for what's going on in adult correction center, because a lot of youth start having issues and things in the school system. So I know that some of the schools have started the restorative practices. And so that is a model that has shown a lot of success in some of the school districts. And so, I know I've gone to a conference before, a couple of conferences, and that even some of the adult correctional facilities are using that model too. So just to throw that out there, but just wanted to say, number one, when it looks to capitalism in the financial aspect, there's a saying, follow the money. And so a lot of money, the privatizations and all those other entities that are involved in the criminal justice system are reaping benefits from people being incarcerated. So there actually is a proponent to maybe get people there so they can continue to maintain their business. What would be a call to action for different organizations that will, partner with the League of Women Voters and other non-partisan organizations or partisan organizations? What is a call of action that you would give for us to take away from this presentation?
Well, looking at your own communities and discerning what seems to need change, education, and advocacy. looking at what kind of situation you have in your own communities. And so this whole area is fertile ground for different kinds of advocacy. One individual I ran into at the last convention, her league was dealing with the whole money issue of the incarcerated people getting money from their homes, but then to cash the money order or check, there was a substantial fee. I mean, just, it is so big that you just have to carve out a little part that you feel like that you could have some impact. Did I give you so much information? You're overwhelmed. Judy.
Judy McDowell, you're next.
Yeah, I just wanted to note that the league does have a very extensive position regarding privatization.
Mhm.
Many of us here in our local league participated in that study, and the whole look at prisons was a part of that study, so that we do have a position to speak out in relationship to the privatization of prisons.
Thank you, Judy. And Carol?
Thank you, Sandra. That was just awesome. I went to a talk, and it was with the Department of Corrections, Education and Training, and they said across US, but for sure in Michigan, about 20,000 inmates are released into their communities every year. And if you want to talk about public safety, you want to talk about how you can help them become contributing to citizens instead of ostracizing them and things like that. So I think there's a lot to do with that too. And I really commend you for doing all this work.
Thank you. Thank you. That part, it was very interesting, because that preparation begins before they get to the community. They really have some preparation, some work that has to be done. It's so easy to just keep talking, okay? But I know I'm not gonna keep talking. But even things like money handling skills, interpersonal relations skills, those voting, okay, where and how to vote. There are so many things that these folks need. And so this whole topic can be really fertile ground, depending on where you see something you want to work with.
Thank you, Sandy. It has been marvelous. We appreciate all your efforts and your work. And I'm assuming, I don't know if Ellen or Catherine, you have gotten all this on YouTube, correct?
It is all being recorded and we can add it to our YouTube.
Absolutely, because I believe this is information that we can continue to share with Sandy's diligence and commitment to factual information about the things that we need to think about as it relates to criminal justice and to equity. And I just can't thank her enough for everything she's done tonight. So Sandy, a big kudos to you.
Thank you. Big kudos to the league. I had to give them a shout out.
And I encourage all of you. Now, how do I make sure that this 2-page document that I have that you entitled "The View of Criminal Justice System Through the Lens" with your outline with all the recommended reading? Will we be putting that out on our website for you people to get?
If that is your choice, if that is your desire.
It is my choice and my
The first time around, last month, I had a stack of these to hand out. With continued study, the stack is well, the stack is there, but there are a few more items on the outline, few more books and articles and recommended reading on the list. So wherever you see fit, just let me know.
I will work with Ellen and you and others to get this out on our website so that we can create an opportunity for people to have recommended reading on this topic, because you've done so much research. And I think that your information that you've provided is just invaluable for people that want to really dig into this opportunity to figure out what we can do to make life better in the criminal justice system. Are there any other comments that people want to make?
This is Mary McDonald, and I would just like to thank Sandy, because some of us tonight we knew of her capabilities and other things that she can do, but she pulled us here tonight, and it's an interesting topic. And I'm really glad to be here. There's someone in my family who many years ago in Saginaw was affiliated with the League of Women Voters. She passed away a long time ago. But some of what I heard this evening, she was talking about many moons ago. And I want to thank Sandy and also her husband, who is not with us in this meeting, because they encourage us to write letters, attend hearings, do what we can regarding the various bills that come up. And when it comes to advocacy, you've got a winner in Sandy. And she encourages us all, I would say, who are in this meeting, not just those of us from the Saginaw area, but to be involved. And rightfully we should, because there's something as far as it relates to mental health and incarceration that it's a major issue.
Yes.
And I'm hoping that is something we will continue to work on, whether as a part of the league or external to the league, because mental health struggles are real. I think I'm piggybacking on something Commissioner Coney said, but it's not enough for us just to attend and hear the stats and see what others are doing, but there is a call for involvement. And so thank you all, members of the league. Thank you, especially Sandy. And yeah, you've kind of turned the fires on here. So thanks again. And it was a pleasure being with you all this evening.
All right. And with that,
I'm back.
is there any final comments before?
Carol had one.
There you go, Sandy. Last comment.
Okay.
Do that there. I have a question relative to the status of the state position. You said the state position has already adopted this information, really?
Yes.
And
Yes.
so
Yes.
the state convention this spring,
Last fall.
what?
Yep. It was last
2 years ago.
Okay, so it was adopted. So at this point, it's a matter of keeping track of what's going on in the legislature as far as, I suppose, programs and services provided, the inmates and so on, what they can do.
Yes.
You're not going to have, in Norwegian prisons, there's choirs. We don't do that.
And actually, the position that Sandy motivated the Michigan League to adopt at their convention last year is now become the US position. She even went to the US meeting and it was adopted. So what she worked on is now is the position for both the US, the League of Women Voters of Michigan, and our local league.
And so now we're left with what will be done up with it in
Yes,
various states to change the conditions or improve the conditions, I should say, and reduce the number of incarcerations.
Well, one thing too, if you read the position, it's very, very comprehensive. It has a position on every aspect in the whole incarceration sequence. So whatever, of course, we're in Midland, and we have to determine what is an issue that we want to address.
Right. Yep. So with that, I'm going to give everybody a kudos. And Sandy, you've done a fabulous job
Yeah.
this evening.
Thank you.
And when
Glad
Linda's,
there's Zoom, so we don't have to be out in the snow.
I want to
Yes, where is Judy?